Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. It's great to be with you again. My name is Amy Rafat. I am a private sector specialist with IFC's employability program, Vitae, and I will be moderating this session. Today, we want to talk to you about an important topic, career advising. The career services at an education institution provides really the vital link between a student's present life, studying for their degree or diploma, and the link to their future life, their work, and the way they will be living and contributing to society. And we know that is what our audience today on the webinar cares about the most, their students getting decent jobs once they graduate and thus being able to lead a good life. The question is, how can education institutions go about doing this? So in this webinar, we aim to provide you with valuable information, tips, some resources, regardless of where you are, like how early or advanced you are as an institution on giving career services to your students. So we have selected our speaker based on his extensive experience in this space, and I am delighted to introduce Jim Beirne. Hi, Jim. He has taught and provided career advice to Washington University students, alumni, and colleagues for 18 years. He has been a member of the Global Curriculum Innovation Advisory Board of the Future Talent Council, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and is a past Associate Dean of the Olin Business School and Director of the Weston Career Center, amongst others. He's also worked in Africa, where Jim has helped universities build a career services unit, in addition to working in Brazil for 5 years. And his career not only included the academic perspective, but also the private sector perspective, as he's led recruiting units of large multinationals. So he is able to see the topic of career advising from both sides, education side and employment side. So I'm sure you will have questions for Jim. So we have a dedicated question and answer session during the second half of the webinar, and I'd like to encourage you to put in your questions during the session in the Q&A box that you will find below or on the top of your screen, depending on what kind of a device you're using. Now, before moving to our discussion, we have a question for you just to better understand who is with us online today. And that question is, and Marley will be showing it up, is, does your institution have a career services unit? Yes, no, or no, but you do provide career services in an informal way, not through a dedicated unit. So we'll give the audience a couple of seconds to respond to that. And while they respond to that, let me move to you, Jim, and ask you and jump right into it and ask you, what is career services? Can we give a general definition? Because there are many.
I can hear you, Amy. You're breaking up a little bit. But,
okay. Let me,
okay,
no worries. Let me just ask that question again. So while we're waiting for our audience to respond to the poll, I wanted to ask you could you give a definition of career services? Because there are many different things associated with that term.
Sure. And thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. Career services is the sum of services delivered at a school that helps a student establish and manage their career. It is part self-assessment, students getting to understand themselves better, part understanding how to go to the marketplace and how to present themselves in the marketplace, and how to make decisions along all of those steps so that they not only get a job, but they really establish and manage their careers.
Right. Okay. Yes. And before we go into a bit more detail there.
I would say going back in time to some organizations called these offices placement offices, and just put on some kind of activity at the end of the academic experience. But it's really evolved today into an integrated part of the overall educational and academic delivery. And ideally, it's started when the students start their academic studies so that they can better understand what they're studying and then how to apply it in the job marketplace.
Right, so it starts early on and throughout the student's life cycle. That's an important point there. And I just wanted to apologize to the audience. There seems to be some lag in there, the connection. So sorry if there was a lag there. So let's go to the poll question. I think Marley has already put them up there. So 25% don't have any career services. 50% do offer it on an ad hoc basis. And 25% have a specialized unit. Okay, good to know. So so you are in the right place, wherever you are upon on that spectrum, and we're going to be providing tips for all kinds of institutions. So going back to you, Jim, in your experience, because I think this is an important question for our for our audience, is because it's about resources. What's the number of staff needed to provide this service in terms of student to staff ratio? So,
Well, I've seen one-person shops. I've seen some universities have as many as 50 or 60 individuals, full-time employees working in career services. The ratio that's pretty normal is about one full-time equivalent individual for every 1,500 students. Now that's an average, but it's a good start.
okay. Good to know, but that's still an investment of resources, right? So, so let's take, right, yeah. So why do you think, in your opinion, why should an education institution invest in this? Why is it so important? Isn't it enough for an institution to provide them with the knowledge and skills and then let them go out there and find their own jobs?
No, I think this is a really critical part of the educational delivery. And successful graduates of a school will help the school going forward. And if you are only giving students an academic experience, your students are going to be at a disadvantage because they don't know how to apply that academic experience in the job marketplace. So I think it's really, really important. And more I'm seeing more colleges, universities, community colleges investing in more resources, both employees and also on websites.
Okay. So yeah, they're basically that your students are going to be at a huge disadvantage without this. Okay, and then how should a college go about setting up a career services offering if they don't have the offering, or if they have a very limited offering, which is the case of most of our audience online today?
Well, I think a very first step is finding out, to the best of your ability, where your current graduates are. I think that is a good start. The career office needs to collect some data, or the institution needs to collect some data. I would talk to some local employers and find out if they are hiring your graduates and why they hire your graduates. I would provide a template, kind of a roadmap to the students, if you don't have a lot of resources, to say, here are the steps that you need to take during your time here at our institution to make sure that you fully realize the outcomes and apply your academic experience to the best job that you can get. There are several templates that are available online for free that can help with this. And I think one of the last things that would be important is to bring back your alumni, have them come back into the classroom and talk about where they work, why they work there, what they enjoy, what skills and competencies they had to be able to obtain that job.
Okay, that's a really good tip. Bringing in alumni. Okay. And so those are the let's say some basic steps an institution could take. But could you talk us through the full career services offering? Because CV is the thing that springs to mind when people say career services, and I know it's much more than that, right?
It is. It's funny because when people think about getting a job, the first thing they think about is I have to get a CV together. I have to update my CV. That is not the first thing they should be doing at all. The very first step is for the student to identify by themselves, and they can do this with help, but identify their interest, their values, what competencies they have, what skills they want to get, what motivates them, and where they might best optimize all of those personal interest and values. So that's the first step, and we call this self-assessment. And there are some great books and websites out there that our faculty can point, and career services professionals can point students to rank order and identify some of those very important traits. And each student's going to be different. So that's the first step. The second step is market assessment, and that's identifying what's out there. There's a term that has been used a lot recently called employment brand. And so if you're thinking about a cereal has a brand for breakfast, but there's an employment brand for that company that makes the cereal. Is it a good place to work? Can you get training? So that's learning more about what is going on in the marketplace. Who are the companies that do train? Where are they? And are they hiring? So that's the second step, understanding what's going on in the market. The third step, and this is where the CV comes in, I would put an umbrella over this and call it presentation skills, but it's a number of different things. It's having a CV or a resume, having a LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn did not exist 15 years ago. Today, it's the most important element of the job search. I think it's a critical element to have a LinkedIn profile. But not only having a polished LinkedIn profile, understanding how to use LinkedIn. That's a whole other body of knowledge, which is very easy to acquire, but very important for a student to learn. Also, with this presentation umbrella, a student should have what's called an elevator pitch. And the idea with an elevator pitch is that if you had 30 seconds and you were in an elevator with a potential employer or someone that could help you find a job, what would you tell them? Would you say, oh, I'm a philosophy major? Or would you tell them about your values and what motivates you and demonstrate your energy and demonstrate your communication? So if you have a good elevator pitch, you can give that elevator pitch to your family, to your friends, the people you don't know, and they can also help you. And then also, in order to close this whole presentation piece, is understanding how to interview. What is a behavioral interview? How should you prepare for an interview? What kind of questions are typically asked? So that's the third step. You've got self-assessment, market assessment, and you've got presentation skills. And as you develop all of those skills, then you need a strategy and tactics. You may have an ideal job, but your ideal job you might not be able to obtain for 5 or 10 years. So how do you create the pathway with tactics and a strategy in terms of the time you're expending and who you're talking to and what you're telling them? How are you dividing up your time in order to achieve the results that you want? One example could be, let's say a student has a year left in school and they have an ideal job they want, and they only have 5 hours a week to spend on their career work. Well, maybe they spend a couple of hours of those 5 hours working on their ideal job. They'll have very specific conversations with very specific people, finding out if they're competitive for that. And then maybe they take another 2 hours and say, here's a job that will give me some experience. It's not a perfect or an ideal job, but it will build my skills and my competencies up towards my ideal job, and spend 2 hours on that. And then finally take their last hour and say, if I'm having trouble getting this ideal job, what should I be doing now so that I'll have options by the time I graduate? So it's an overall strategy and then very specific tactics for each part of that job search.
Okay, I wanted to pick up on this last point you were talking about, that tactics, because you didn't mention spending a lot of time online, sending out CVs, for example. And I wanted to ask you, isn't that one of the best ways for a student to go about getting a job?
Well, I think it's an important action that has to be taken. But I can say from experience and being on the employer side that I think the odds of someone finding a job ad and applying to the job and getting the job, the odds are at best 1 in 100.
Wow.
And I say that again, at best 1 in 100. And I've had many students who would show up to my office early in the morning and they didn't get any sleep, and they said, I applied to 10 jobs. I was up till 3 o'clock last night, and they feel really good. But if they apply to 10 jobs, they don't have 10% chance. They have a 1% chance of getting this job. There's a lot more to it than just sending the application in.
Okay, so what should they be doing though? Let's say my ideal job or my objective here is to be a manager in a car factory, or I want to go work for government. That's what my diploma is all about. What should I be doing then?
Well, I would do those first 3 steps. I would do self-assessment. I would find out about the automobile factory and some of their competitors and see if it's growing or not. And I would get my presentation skills polished up and ready. Then I would look at what jobs they're putting out there, but I would first go to LinkedIn and see who is working at that factory, who is on LinkedIn. Then I would reach out to these individuals and ask them for 20 minutes or 30 minutes of their time at their convenience to talk about how they got the job, what it's like working there, what they would recommend, what courses I could best, what courses would be ideal to take to make me a more competitive candidate. So this is called a career conversation, or some people call it an informational interview. But this is really critical in terms of getting good information about what the employment brand is, what it's like to work there, and most importantly, making a positive impression on that individual in the company. And then what you do at the end of the conversation is ask them if they're inclined to put in a good word for you because you're putting an application into the company. And that's called a referral. And in my experience, referrals account for anywhere from 30 to 60% of all the jobs that are obtained. And it's not family and friends. People think, oh, I need to know somebody there.
Yeah.
Family and friends are usually 3%, maybe 4%. But making a good professional impression on someone in the organization or on the hiring manager or on the human resources manager, that's what usually gets someone a job. Okay, they have to make the application, but you want to get the referral too. And that's where most jobs, whether it's an internship or a co-op or a full-time role, that's how most jobs are being filled today.
Okay, so basically definitely need to go out there and reach out, and probably, I mean, what I'm thinking how I would feel, not be afraid of rejection, because you could get rejected.
Oh, if you're not getting rejected, you're not doing your job. This, I would say probably 40% of the time, someone will respond and say, yes, I'll be happy to talk to you. But here's part of the secret. When you send them a note, you do not send them your CV or your resume. You put your LinkedIn profile URL on your note, and they're going to say, do I know this person? Do I know them? And they'll see the LinkedIn button, so they'll hit LinkedIn, and then they'll see the student, and then they'll think back, wow, 5 or 10 years ago, I wish I had talked to someone like me. I could have saved myself a lot of grief and learned a lot quickly. I'll be more than happy to spend 20 minutes helping you out. And that, one of the things students will find is that people love to talk about themselves and love to talk about their jobs. So that connection can be relatively easily made, and it takes practice. So there will be rejection, absolutely, but it takes practice and it takes follow-up.
Okay, got it. Now, at this point, what I'd like to do is delve a bit deeper into those 4 steps, especially from the point of a college or a technical training institution, university, and how they can help their students go through that process. So I will ask Marley to put up your slides, which explains the 4, that just sets out the 4 stages. And let's start with step 1 or stage 1, the self-assessment. What can a college, the career services at a college do at this?
Okay, and you've broken up. Okay, I can hear you. Okay. Would you like me to comment on the slides?
Yeah, so I was going to say yes. Yeah, sorry for the connection there. So could we go through these 4 stages one at a time from the perspective of the college? So let's start with stage 1, the self-assessment. What can the staff or whoever's helping on the career services end do to help students at this stage?
Well, an easy way to start is to get list of values and motivations and interest and personality traits. And there are many lists, and I think we're going to be providing some free websites where you can provide students a list of, here are a number of different values. Which ones do you prioritize? What ones are nice to have? What ones do you have to have? So provide them these checklists. Then the students can talk among themselves, talk to their peers, talk to their parents, talk to their career services folks, just to confirm that these really are the things that are most important to them. Now, it's interesting to see, but it actually makes sense when you think about it. There's been a lot of research at Harvard that says that interest and values and what motivates you are more important than your skill set. And if you think about that, the skills that were most important to us 10 years ago are not the ones we're using today, given how we're using the internet, given how we're using technology and so forth. So you can always reskill and upskill, but the core of a person's career is really in their interest and values and what's motivating. So that's an important way to start. Provide the list, let the students rank order what's most important to them.
Okay.
And that's
oh, sorry.
Well, and then there's actually a really good book that's very inexpensive that's out there called What Color is Your Parachute for College Students? And it's a wonderful book that has a lot of these exercises. A student can play around with all of the games and the puzzles in there and do the exercises, and it walks them through this roadmap of how to first look inside themselves before they go out and start looking at the marketplace. There's also one other book by the same author that's entitled You Majored in What? And that book I've seen out in Amazon for about $1 or $2. You can get it used,
Wow.
and it's a really good book so that a student doesn't say, I'm a major and so forth, but they talk about what's important to them, to their future employers.
Okay, so that's great. So there are some like really low cost and some free templates out there. And to the audience, by the way, we will be sharing these in our webinar, in our email after the webinar, our thank you email. So you will be receiving that. I also wanted to note that there are some resources provided by the public sector in South Africa on performing these exercises, and we will be sharing that website as well. So now moving to stage 2, or step number 2 in with our students. What can a university do, or a college, a technical training institute at this stage, the market assessment?
Well, again, I think it's really important to identify where your alumni have gone to date, because it demonstrates that certain employers really do value the education that they get from your institution. So I would start to get some outcomes data. First, where are your alumni now? And then start collecting information from your students before they leave or after they leave graduation. I think LinkedIn is a great place to start. And this is why, if I was king and in charge of everything, I would make every single student make it mandatory that they have a LinkedIn profile. Because once they create that LinkedIn profile, it will be attached to your institution, and you can always follow them as they change jobs, change cities, make the normal changes that they make in their life. But if a school could ask them to get the LinkedIn profile, I think that's a great place to start. I would look at what majors you are producing in your institution, and then go out and talk to the employers that are hiring some of those where there's a volume of graduates. I'd also start with your faculty and talk to faculty members, because faculty always have some students that they really enjoy and they follow and they know where they are, and they can help the Career Services Office identify where some of your graduates go. Chambers of commerces, any type of business institution or associations are a good place to find some data. And then when you have the time, go talk to some employers and ask them what they would like to see in future hires. What's missing? What do they have to train for that they would love to see coming out of your institution? And that's one of the best conversations to have, because if you can then polish up students in some area, some functional area that's important to that organization, they'll come back again and again to hire your students.
Okay, so data, definitely collecting all that data, talking to employers. And then I wanted to go to the point you made earlier on alumni. Could alumni help at this point?
Alumni are usually big cheerleaders for your institution. So I would ask them what areas are growing. I would see if they would be willing to take in a co-op or an intern and give them a try. and just getting alumni more involved. And then again, if you can bring them back and have them come into the classroom or give a workshop or give a panel and talk about what it's like to work in this automotive factory, that's a great way for students to get more market information and to go up afterwards and talk to these individuals and build a relationship and then link in with them.
Yeah, exactly. LinkedIn is a big one for you. Okay, at this point, I just wanted to come back to the audience and ask, because you've brought up the topic of alumni and like how important it is to leverage them, and ask this question: does your institution utilize alumni for career advisory services? Yes, we have a formal system. Yes, we engage them, but in an ad hoc way, or no? And I'll give the audience a few seconds to respond to that while we, Jim, talk about the stage 3, presentation skills. What can a college do at this stage to help their students move on?
Again, I think checklists are very important. There is a 2-page guideline on LinkedIn, which we'll provide afterwards, that talks about how to establish and polish a LinkedIn profile. There are hundreds of websites, and you can just Google on how to use LinkedIn and how best to then access people in areas that you're most interested in. And then I would work with the students on their 30-second elevator pitch, because that encompasses the self-assessment piece. It encompasses the market that they're speaking to. It gets them to practice their communication skills. And so putting students in a room, and literally one thing that I've done, which is kind of fun, is putting students in a room, whether there's 10 or 30 of them, and have them each give their elevator pitch. And they crowdsource, and they say, I'm really interested in working in social media. And then someone in one of their peers will say, well, I know some people in social media, and away they go. So I think constantly practicing and updating this elevator pitch allows students to get the word out to their peers and potential employers, and kind of create more career assistance for themselves.
So on this one, yeah, crowdsourcing would be one way to reduce resources, but it does sound like you do need a staff member, and maybe to some extent a bit of intense work with student to student. Or are there ways for a college to leverage other resources out there, like on the first 2 stages? Is there a way to leverage any free tools out there so that it doesn't require such intense interaction with staff members for colleges that may be a bit limited on that?
There are many free tools out there, and the many universities in both Europe and North America, I know, have in front of any paywall and with no limits, they have these roadmaps that are out there that walk students through these processes. Columbia University has a 100-page document that I haven't mentioned to you before that's out there that is very well done. Vanderbilt University has a fabulous free 150-page book on walking students through this roadmap and through these processes. And it's used not only for students, but for alumni. You can use these, and they're all free and open access. So it's a great way to geometrically impact your students, because you provide them this information and then they can reflect on it.
Right. And then they come back in a group as opposed to one-on-one. Got it. Okay, let's look at our results. So and no one has a formal system of engaging alumni, but 33% engage alumni in an ad hoc way, and 66% don't engage alumni for career services. So I suppose this is a great tip you've provided here.
And I guarantee you, if you bring back an alumni, whether they're out 5 years or 25 years, and frankly, the younger ones are more impressive to the current students. If you bring them back, invite them in to talk to students, it's a win-win for the students, a win for the institution, and the alumni love it. They really, really love giving back.
No, I can imagine. I would love it, but you've just ruled me out by saying if you're more than 20 years, it wouldn't. They're not going to be as interested.
It's good to have titles sometimes, but yeah, the younger ones can relate.
Okay, got it. No, I see that. And then moving to steps or stage 4, strategy and tactics. On this one, which is a bit more longer term, again, what could the college do to help their students start thinking about this? What tools are out there that they could provide them with?
Well, a couple of the documents I referenced just a couple of minutes ago are helpful. And I think when I talk about strategy and tactics, so like let's use the example of being a manager of automobile car factory. I would then show the students give them a series of questions to find out, well, what kind of experiences and competencies does a manager need? And then have the students talk to people in that industry. And for example, I would think a manager would need to understand how to manage a large group of people, how to have a profit and loss budget, how to understand social media marketing, a number of different areas, and then have the students say, okay, that's what I want to do long term, but tactically, nobody's going to hire me to do that right away, but I can get some experience in social media marketing in my first role. And then I can move in that organization and get some experience managing people. And so they kind of build tactically with an overall strategy and objective in mind in terms of how they want to proceed. So I think this is where it gets really into the education and giving students a template on how you go, what questions you go about asking, and then what do you do with the answers that you get? You know, what do you do in terms of then managing your career activities? I would look at the jobs that are posted that the students want to do ideally, and then look at the skills and competencies that are being requested, the experience that's being requested, and have the students take that to heart and understand that's tactically some of the experience they need to get. And I think what's interesting here is 10 years from now, jobs are going to be so different. So not saying like at the end of the day, whether you become the manager of the automobile factory or not is not the most important thing. It's, are you building up the skills relative to your interests and values and things that are important to you that will prepare you for the jobs of the future that don't even exist today.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we can't even project them at this point. And so going back to the career services coach or advisor, and I think you've already mentioned a few, but what tools exist to help them, like references or tools specifically for them to help them move forward on this job?
Well, I think understanding this roadmap is important, and what color is your parachute for college is a great source. There's something called Picture Your Career at Vanderbilt University. All you have to do is type in Picture Your Career and you can download that document again, which is a roadmap, so that the advisors understand what needs to be done. You know, students come in and as an advisor for almost 30 years here, students come in with a question in mind. That's really not the question they need to be asking, but you've got to hear where they're coming from. First, they want to get their CV done, but then why do they want to get it done? So as an advisor, you really have to listen to the student, understand where they are, and then give them the pathways, help them identify where they are, and then give them the pathways and some of the skills that that they really do need to go out there and be successful. One other comment I'd make too, there's some companies, some organizations, some governmental entities are really good at training students and graduates. And I would strongly suggest that you help students identify who are good trainers. Okay, and if you can do that, if they get good training after school, then that'll just make them more valuable in the marketplace.
Okay, I think those are some good tips there. And then I wanted to ask, because we've addressed this to a huge extent, but to really focus in on a need that I think many institutions online today have, and that's limited resources to offer this. So do you have any additional tips beyond the free templates and books that you suggested online on how they might go about offering their career services with limited resources?
I think a great way, and again, this is also a win-win-win, is to take your more senior students and train them on the basics that we've talked about here. They're learning and they're really solidifying their understanding and their experience, and then have them kind of be the trainers for current students. All of the research that I've seen says this is who students listen to first. They listen to their peers. Then they may pay attention to their faculty. Then they may pay attention to their parents. And career services folks are usually fourth or fifth, frankly. So if you can bring your more senior students in some of these basics and essentials, they can exponentially impact your student body, and they'll get more experience too, which makes them better qualified as they go out into the marketplace. There's a word or a phrase we use, which are career peers. And a number of colleges I know and community colleges use career peers as trainers for students. And they're just the older students who get it and are really interested in this.
Goodness. Okay, we'll move into Q&A. I was just letting everyone know that we will be sending the resources, the free and the books, that the free resources and the books that you were mentioned, and that we have a survey in that, and we would really appreciate it if everyone responded to that survey on how you found this experience. Sorry about the technology, but how you found this webinar, how useful the substance was, because this really helps us deliver what you need. So, Jim, I think we'll move into Q&A. So we have the first question is on related to technology. And do you have any suggestions on how technology, especially free technology, could help colleges with limited resources?
I think using your website to put up the entire progression of the sequence we talked about: self-assessment, market assessment, presentation skills, strategy and tactics, and giving examples would be most helpful. And then within that site, which can be quite static, you can put in the URLs to a number of the other resources that we've mentioned. And that would be a great start. It would be a great start. And the other thing I'd do is, again, go to LinkedIn. If you, as a career services person or if you are not on LinkedIn and you don't know how best to use LinkedIn, that in itself could be an interesting webinar. We do it about every 2 or 3 months at my university to make sure that everybody, the staff, the faculty,
I can't hear you at the moment, Jim. I don't know if you,
Okay.
You're back. Okay, no, I can hear you now. Okay, great. Okay, that's a good one. Then there is another question coming through, which is a repetition of the question I asked, so which you didn't have the chance to answer. The audience is interested in any differences you've seen between setting up a career services unit in Africa and the US and your experience with the students.
And I'm sorry, Amy, could you please repeat that?
So the audience is interested in any differences you've noticed between Africa and the US setting up a career services unit, or when talking to students.
Well, in talking to students, that's a really good question. I think it's very important for a student to work on their elevator pitch. It's not good enough to say, or let me give you a good example. If a student says, I'm a person who love to solve problems. I love working with a variety of people. I'm good at math. I want to understand the story behind the data and the numbers and how I can influence them to make the company better. To me, that's a much better conversation than to say, I'm an accounting major.
Mm-hmm.
So if the student can talk about what they can bring to an organization and do it in an energetic and a motivated way, they demonstrate their communications. I found that to be much more successful than a student saying, this is my major. Do you have any jobs? Which doesn't get them very far. And I found that draws someone into the conversation and gets them more engaged with the candidate who is the student. And so I think while credentials are important, I think demonstrating in the process what you're bringing to a potential employer is much more important. And I think that's something that students can work on.
Mm-hmm. And you noticed that as a difference between different countries?
I've noticed and students would come up to me and say, how can I get this job I really want? But if I tell them I have this degree, there's 10 other people who want this job just as much. They don't have a degree, and the company will then probably go to those people first because I'm walking in saying I've got this great credential. And that's really not the best way to present themselves, I think. I think it's more to demonstrate and, again, reiterate what they're bringing to the organization.
Okay. And then we have a question, and this is on, an explanation that our graduates in South Africa a lot of them need to focus on opening up a business due to very high unemployment rates. And the question is, does this process you talk about work for graduates interested in setting up their own business the same way as it does for employment?
I believe essentially it does, because you've got to have your elevator pitch ready. And to do that, you have to understand what's important to you and what the market needs. And you may not be talking to a hiring manager, you may be talking to some other people who you're trying to get to help you start this business. But I think essentially the same pathway can be taken. And then if you are an entrepreneur and you have to set up your own business, you have to convince people to give you some space or some money or some free service to help you out to get started. So I think it's important to have this story in mind, this vision of what you want to accomplish in mind, to bring others around you to get you the resources that you need. because even as an entrepreneur, you need to get other people to help you out to get started.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. So we have a few more questions left, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I will, I'm afraid I'll have to wrap it up now. What I'll say is we've learned some really good points from Jim. So thank you, Jim, for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you have some good ideas now on taking forward your institution regarding career services for your students. I hope the tips, resources, and suggestions that Jim has provided here will have given you some really good ideas. As we said, we are going to be sharing a list of those in the email that we send out to you right after this webinar, which also includes the survey. We would really appreciate you responding to that survey on how you found the content and resources here, so that it helps us put together more webinars that are of interest to you. And if you would like more resources on the topic of employability in general, please visit our IFC website, IFC Vitae website, which is also in your email. And there's also a free benchmarking exercise that we think you will find very helpful. So thank you again, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Bye.